Hey JCA, happy Sunday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. I'm happy to be here with you today. This is the first time that I'm going sweet. So I have such a sweet tooth and there is no reason to not include dessert and yummy, healthy, sweet treats into your day. So I've got this awesome recipe. I have to admit, I'm not a baker. I like to cook food and you probably have already noticed if you've watched any of my videos that I don't usually follow a very exact recipe. I like to add and you know, sort of eyeball things and just sort of be you know, sort of creative as I'm cooking. But with baking, you have to be a lot more on point, use exact measurements of things, and so it takes a lot of equipment. So I don't usually do it, but I'm really excited about this recipe. There's a lot of different healthy ingredients that I wanted to talk about. It's also gluten-free, and I'm gonna get into a little bit about why some people are gluten-free and why that's such a big trend nowadays. And so I guess I'll get going and I'll talk as I go. So I've already laid out a lot of the ingredients that I'm going to be using, so I'm just going to talk about each one and why each of them is included in a really healthy diet. So I have my wet ingredients here. This recipe called for, and I will post the recipe you know, in the comments to this video afterwards, so you can see exactly the measurements that I'm using. But there's 4 eggs. This is the wet ingredients. So I have 4 eggs in here. And I wanted to mention that when you purchase eggs, it's really important to try to find the more high quality eggs that come from chickens that are pasture raised, so they're not caged. They are wandering freely, you know, in their field. They are fed organic grass. So this is one of the brands that I really like. It's called Vital Farms. There is another brand. It's a yellow, I'm picturing a yellow carton. I don't remember the name, but I could also add that if you ask and you want to know. But this is Vital Farms. It comes from pasture raised organic, and they are not caged. So those are sort of the 3 things that I really look for: pasture raised, organic, and cage free. Sometimes you'll also see that they have higher levels of DHA included. That's always a benefit. So these are really healthy, good eggs if you're not raising your own chickens. So we have 4 eggs in there. We have ghee butter. Now I get that question a lot. Why do you choose ghee over regular butter? And there's 2 reasons. Number 1, because ghee has a higher smoke point. So if I'm going to be cooking at higher temperatures, then ghee is better because it won't burn, and we are always trying to prevent burning our butter or any of our fats that we use, because when they burn, they create a chemical that's quite damaging inside of us. So ghee is better for that reason. And the second reason is because ghee also has higher amounts of something called short chain fatty acids. And that's a mouthful, but basically the short chain fatty acids are something that the gut bacteria in our bodies release, which is really healthy for us, for our digestion. And so having more in your food is also a benefit. So ghee has more of those short chain fatty acids. Ghee is really just clarified butter. So you can look up on how that process goes along, but it's very similar to butter, it's just processed a little differently. So this recipe, like I said, called for 4 eggs, and I'm going to write it in the recipe, but I believe it was 1/4 cup ghee and then 2 tablespoons of melted ghee or melted butter. So I'm going to stick this in the microwave for a few seconds to melt it. But before I do that, let me just explain what else is in here. I also have 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, which I love vanilla extract or almond extract. I think I even mentioned last week when I'm trying to get the flavor flavor of chocolate mint. I used a little bit of peppermint extract, which, by the way, a little bit of that goes a really long way. So be careful with how much peppermint extract you add. But I love those ways of adding that type of flavor that you can't always get from seasonings and spices. So vanilla extract, almond extract, and sometimes peppermint. And then I also have in here a tablespoon of maple syrup. And I do get this question all the time: what are healthy sweeteners? So the ones that I recommend and that I really like are maple syrup, honey, dates if you can blend it or even get the date syrup. Dates are very healthy for us and a great way to add sweetness to your food. So maple syrup, honey, dates, and stevia. Stevia extract especially. Stevia extract is a very potent antioxidant. It comes from an herb in the ground. So stevia is another really healthy sweetener. So those are a few of the ones. Oh, and I also really like molasses. Molasses I add to a lot of the sauces that I use when I cook my meats. That's another, adds like a chocolatey sort of caramel type flavor to very rich flavor, but sweet, and that's another sweetener that I like to use. So molasses, maple syrup, honey, stevia, and date syrup. Okay, so in here, the 4 eggs that were pasture raised, organic, and cage-free. I have a tablespoon of my maple syrup, I have my ghee, and I have a little bit of ghee that I'm gonna stick in the microwave right before I'm about to mix it in there. In my dry ingredients, so it's interesting, we do not need to add any sugar, which is really great because I always talk about nutrient density. Nutrient density is making sure that every bite of food that you eat is packed with nutrition, because it's our opportunity. Every time we eat is an opportunity for us to give our bodies vitamins and minerals and healthy protein or fat to help your body function appropriately. If we fill up on ingredients and foods that don't have those type of vitamins and minerals and nutrients, then we're missing that opportunity to feed good processes in our body, and we're also filling up on things that are just going to get stored as fat, which can then lead to inflammation and those kind of things. So I don't have to use any sugar in here. What I have in here is all nutrient dense, healthy products. So I have coconut flour, which I love coconut or almond flour. They both have really good flavor and they're great substitutes for gluten. And like I promised, I will talk about gluten towards the end once I finish this recipe. But I love this as an option, and especially for sweet foods that are sweeter, because coconut really, it just has this really good, sweet, yummy flavor. You gotta try it. So I have that. I have a scoop of protein powder. It really could be any protein powder that you like. This one happens to be collagen peptides. Collagen is in all of our skin and our hair and our nails. It's really healthy to keep us strong and intact. Our skin stays a little more intact. The only thing I would warn against with collagen is that if you're the type of person who suffers from a bit of constipation, then collagen could possibly make it a little bit worse. So if you do suffer from that, then I wouldn't necessarily choose collagen. I would just get another type of whey protein powder if you're looking to add protein to your diet. So protein, I have my coconut flour, I have a teaspoon of cinnamon, and I spoke about last week that cinnamon is especially healthy for you to control your blood sugar and blood pressure. So I really love cinnamon, especially the research that shows those results is using a specific type of cinnamon called Ceylon, which is spelled with a C. So C-E-Y-L-O-N. Ceylon cinnamon is really good for you. I have a little bit of salt, and I actually do put effort into choosing salts that I know have fewer or less amount of microplastics from the waters, from our water. So there's about 2 or 3 different brands of salt that I especially like, that the research, when they measured the amount of plastics in all different types of salts, the 3 that I really like have lower amounts of those plastics. And I will add that in the comments, the 3 brands that I recommend. So this is one of them. And then over here, just a little bit of baking soda, just to help the bread, come together and have the texture of bread. So that's in my dry ingredients. We talked about my wet ingredients, and then here we go. I have a half of an avocado. Avocados are such a healthy type of fat. Fat is necessary for every function in our body. It's necessary for every cell in our body to keep our skin moist, to keep our cell membranes fluid. Our whole body relies on fat. Our brain relies on it, our cholesterol levels. We need cholesterol for our brain. So this is one of the really healthy kinds of fat in avocado. And I will show you, I kept it together here because I wanted to show you the way that I store avocados. Once I cut them open, the way to store them, if you're not finishing it, is to keep the shell, the one that's empty, on top, keep the seed in, and keep the shell on top. And then I wrap it. I try to avoid plastic in my kitchen as much as I can. So I do wrap it in this wax paper covering that I use. You can Google or go on Amazon and look for wax or I guess wax food covering, and it'll come right up. They're okay. I cannot say that I love it. They aren't as great as plastic. Plastic is much easier to use. However, it is a chemical that we do not want to continue to consume. And once we use it on our food, it gets into our food and we do consume it. So we have to find alternatives as best as we can. So this is one that I use. And then I especially like these silicone containers right here. So silicone, I love that. Stick that in there, and then this will go right in my refrigerator. So keeping the avocado together with the skin and the seed will definitely extend the life of your avocado. Stick that in the refrigerator. Okay, now we are moving on to this bowl, which I did not even start yet, so I thought I would do it together with you. Make sure I'm staying on time. I always feel like I'm gonna have a half hour is gonna feel like a long time, but it goes so fast when I'm in here. And before I know it, I barely get through the recipe. I guess I talk too much. I did not realize I could talk this much, honestly. So 3 bananas and a half an avocado. I'm gonna mash all that together. And then to that, I'm gonna add in this half a cup of almond butter. I love almond butter. That's another flavor that I love in so many of my foods and my smoothies. I eat it for dessert with a little dark chocolate and a fruit of any choice, any preference. So almond butter is a great option. What I do try to look for when I buy almond butter is to look at the ingredient list and make sure that the only ingredient on the ingredient list is almonds. So there's no added sugar, there's no added preservatives or any other ingredients besides almonds. You can always, if you feel like you're missing out on sweetness, you could always add some type of fruit, or you can add one of the sweeteners that I already mentioned, either the maple syrup, the honey, date syrup, molasses even, or stevia. Those are the sweeteners that I recommend. But honestly, the less that you focus on eating very sweet foods, the more you don't really miss it. And then when you do eat food with a lot of sugar in it, all of a sudden it tastes much more sweet and not as delicious as you may remember it when you were younger. Okay, so now in there I have my 3 bananas, half avocado, and here is a half a cup of almond butter. I'm gonna mix this all together, and then I'm gonna add in my dark chocolate chips. So I'm a very big fan of chocolate. I think I've talked about that almost every week with you guys. And dark chocolate with greater than 70% cacao is a very healthy food, actually. The ingredient in dark chocolate is the same ingredient that you hear about when you hear about drinking green tea or pomegranates, eating pomegranates or drinking pomegranate juice. They all have this really healthy ingredient, and that is anti-inflammatory. It helps with, it's actually antimicrobial, so it even can, prevent you from having to deal with infections and things like that. So good for your blood pressure, an awesome ingredient. So dark chocolate, green tea, or pomegranate all have that same ingredient. So I'm going to also pour in, I'm actually thinking about saving a couple of my chocolate chips to put on the very top of the bread so that it has that pretty look at the top and we have lots of chocolate on the top of it. But I'm going to mix all this together, and then I'm going to mix my wet ingredients. What's going to happen is this is going to go into the wet ingredients, and then I'm going to sift together all those dry ingredients and put that in afterwards. Okay. This is going to be so delicious. I really can't wait. My favorite part about doing these videos is that I get to eat all this delicious food after I'm done with the video. And unfortunately, I will be putting this in the oven for at 350 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes. And so I won't be able to show you the results right in this video, but I definitely will post a picture of it later on. I smell like the banana and the almond butter. It's such a good combination. That alone is a great snack. That's a good snack. It's a good breakfast. Bananas and almond butter. You could eat that for any snack or meal, and that's really healthy. With a little bit of dark chocolate. Gosh. Love it. Okay, stick that there. To wash my hands. I have to melt these 2 tablespoons of ghee that, again, I'm using because ghee has a higher smoke point, and it also has short chain fatty acids that are not found in butter. So that's why I like ghee. I'm going to stick that in the microwave for about 30 seconds because the recipe called for some ghee that was just whole and solid, and a little bit of melted ghee too. So then I'm going to mix all the wet ingredients here together. So I'll just review again. There's these 4 eggs in here. The pasture-raised, organic, and cage-free eggs. That's my favorite kind. This brand I have here is Vital Farms, but you can certainly look around for other brands that have those 3 characteristics. They are grass-fed, organic, and pasture-raised, and cage-free. Yeah. So 4 eggs, 1 tablespoon of maple syrup, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, that 1/4 cup of solid ghee, and then I just melted 2 tablespoons of ghee also. So I'm gonna have some melted ghee in here as well. Could you believe that I'm not using any white flour or any sugar in this recipe? So that's why I really, really love this recipe and all the ingredients that I'm using. In the dry ingredients, I'm using coconut flour and no sugar whatsoever. The only sweetener that I'm using is the maple syrup that's in here in the wet ingredients. The chocolate chips will add some sweetness along with the banana. Okay, so here's my melted ghee. Put that in there. Okay. I'm going to fold in all of this deliciousness. Okay. Oh my gosh, I wish you could smell this. I wish you could taste this later when it's done. I would love if any of you try this recipe out. Let me know, because I love to hear feedback on, you know, the things I'm doing, the topics I'm talking about. So if you guys ever have a topic that you want me to cover, please let me know. Okay, so this is all doing good. And then the last piece of this is just to sift together my dry ingredients. And that's where I'm gonna start talking about why I'm happy to use coconut flour instead of regular flour. So number one, when I always talk about avoiding processed foods as much as possible. If you think about white flour and how processed that is, the way that you know that something is processed is that when you picture the food the way it was found in nature and you realize that it no longer looks the same way. When you think about the perimeter of the supermarket and all the fruits and vegetables and meats, basically those look the same way, the way they were found in nature. But when you go into the supermarket and see boxed foods and prepared packaged foods, those foods no longer look the same way that they did when they were found in nature. And that is how you know that they are processed. Hey Shirley, I see you. So when you think about using white flour, all the foods that have white flour in them are very processed. That's one way of knowing that that's a processed food, and we're always trying to eat whole foods that are eaten and found the way they were picked in nature. Okay, so I'm up to my dry ingredients here. I have all my wet ingredients all mixed together, my pasture-raised organic eggs. I have my yummy maple syrup, which is one of the sweeteners that I recommended that's healthy. I have my ghee, which I prefer over butter because of the higher smoke point and the short chain fatty acids. I have my almond butter, where when you look at the ingredients, the only ingredients is almonds, no sugar, no other ingredients. I have 3 bananas. I have dark chocolate chips, more than 70% cacao. I have my vanilla extract, which I love for flavor. As an option, almond extract, or even a tiny bit of peppermint if you like the flavor of chocolate and mint together. That's one I use often. Cinnamon, which is a healthy ingredient, helps us control blood sugar and blood pressure. I have a little bit of salt, and I am going to give you the list of the 3 salts that I recommend because they were found to have less microplastics. Salt has plastic in it because it comes from our waters, which unfortunately also have plastic in there. So there are a couple of salts that were tested to have less plastic. So I'm going to list those on my comments in addition to the recipe for this. I added to my dry ingredients a scoop of protein powder. This is collagen powder, which is helpful for your nails and your hair and your skin. And I have coconut flour instead of white flour. So I'm doing that because in my house we happen to be gluten-free. I know that that's a trend. I know a lot of people are like, why are some people going gluten-free and what is that all about? So I'm going to actually have to do, you know, maybe like an entire session on that. But basically the reason is, remember how I talked about processed foods and how white flour is so processed? The way that we get gluten, we have to put grains through several different processes to eventually get the gluten. And by that point, gluten is no longer recognized by our bodies as a food because it's just been processed and changed so many times over. When something is not recognized by our body as a food, then it creates inflammation because our bodies want to attack it just like they would want to attack a germ. So, or a toxin that enters our body. So some people are 100% okay with eating gluten. Some people have an inflammation. Some people are okay with it for most of their lives, and then at a certain age, they start to have inflammation. And the signs of inflammation could be headaches, it could be fatigue, it could be joint pain, and you would not know, or you wouldn't immediately pair the gluten with those symptoms. So that's why if you are experiencing unexplained symptoms of discomfort, sometimes cutting out gluten and dairy are two of the things that I say, just experiment with that. If you're eating a really healthy diet and everything else you're doing well, but you're still dealing with some types of discomfort, then try cutting out gluten and dairy for a couple of weeks and see how you feel. So, going back to the recipe, I hope that helped, and I'm happy to delve into that even further and even on a more individual basis. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm offering individual nutrition services with the JCA, so I'm happy to help you individually understand if that is the reason, if gluten is the reason, or if there's other issues that with food that you are facing. So I have all my wet ingredients here. We're getting towards the end. I'm gonna sift the dry ingredients in there. And then I'm gonna add my top layer of chocolate chips, my dark chocolate chips that are greater than 70% cacao. I'm gonna top that on my bread, and then that's gonna go in my preheated oven, which is preheated to 350 degrees. This is gonna go in the oven for between 45 and 50 minutes. But I promise you that I will post the exact recipe on the comments to this video. So this is really coming together. I am really excited. I also hear the storm coming in, so this is gonna be a fun experiment for my rainy Sunday. So if you're looking for a fun experiment with food, you want to include your kids, this is an easy one to help involve your kids in. So I'm just gonna do all of this, stick my chocolate chips on the top and stick this in the oven. So I'm gonna post a picture of this later today when it's all finished. I'm really excited to eat this, to taste it, and to show you a picture of it. Let me know your comments, your questions. I really can't wait to engage you and hear what you guys are interested in so that I can make sure to focus most of my videos on topics that you're really interested in. So have a great week, everybody. Stay dry today in the storm, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.